Jordan Peterson is in some hot water in regards to their clinical psychology license. This license, like other professions, has protocols, procedures, rules that you're expected to abide by and respect when you're wearing your professional hat, so to speak. So, for example, when I worked for Statistics Canada, whenever I had on my Statistics Canada hat, I had rules, procedures, guidelines that I had to respect. I was the face of Statistics Canada, and as such, I had to abide and respect and not take a strong like, for example, if visitors came in to visit Stats Canada, I couldn't get on a political soapbox and start throwing around political opinions, because as an employee of Statistics Canada or any other civil servant, you have to serve every Canadian, no matter what your internal political ideologies are or whatever. So clinical psychologists in Ontario, which is where Jordan Peterson was licensed, I think. It's the same idea. You have a professionalism you're expected to maintain, and Jordan Peterson has the problem of, when they express themselves publicly and tweet and so on and so forth, Jordan Peterson can't take off the clinical psychologist hat. So when I was a Statistics Canada employee, when I was on social media or in a bar or something, as long as I didn't put on my Stats Can hat, as long as I didn't identify myself as a civil servant, and they didn't know who I was, it was fine. I expressed my personal opinion. Nobody knew I was a Stats Can employee. I could say whatever. However, Jordan Peterson, being famous, can never take off the clinical psychologist hat. It's impossible. It stays on there whether Jordan likes it or not. And this has created a conflict with free speech, which free speech, I think that's very important. But there's a collision between Jordan Peterson's wish to free speech, I don't want to censor my words, and I'm also a clinical psychologist and people are making complaints. So an example of what a clinical psychologist wearing clinical psychologist hat would not do as a professional is to look at a photograph of a model and say, that model objectively is ugly because she's fat. A clinical psychologist wearing their clinical psychologist hat, if they had any integrity at all, would never do that. What they might say instead is, people who prefer thinner lovers would not want to date someone who weighs as much as this model does. They would find an appropriate way to express it, or they would take off their psychology hat entirely if nobody knows them and they're not famous, and they could say whatever they want about the model. So this is an example of where Jordan Peterson can kind of stumble into problems. I appreciate that Jordan Peterson wants to have free speech. And at the same time, I understand the concept that when you wear a professional hat, you're representing that profession. And unfortunately, Jordan Peterson can't take off that psychological hat. I mean, it's just not possible, right? Jordan Peterson is way too famous. And one of the reasons why I think Jordan Peterson should be paying attention to that is because Jordan Peterson expects other famous people, depending on who they are, but let's take the example of Elliot Page. Jordan Peterson has been highly critical of Elliot Page, saying Elliot Page is famous. Elliot Page should therefore, because they're famous, they should not talk about their medical transitioning because they are influential. they have power, they have fame, they have millions of followers. Therefore, it is irresponsible of Elliot Page to talk about their medical transitioning. It is irresponsible of Elliot Page to celebrate it, talk about it, etc. But this is the inconsistency within Jordan Peterson, because Jordan Peterson is demanding that Elliot Page set a standard, be a standard that Jordan Peterson himself are not willing to follow. So Jordan Peterson is basically saying, Elliot Page, you have to follow a different set of rules than what I ascribe to myself. And that doesn't fly. As a clinical psychologist, Jordan Peterson should realize that's just not going to fly. Now, I am absolutely not here to say whether or not it's appropriate for Elliot Page to celebrate medical transitioning and talking. I'm not here to say if it's good, bad, or indifferent. That's not the point of this video. That's such a highly contentious issue, and I don't want to be mobbed by people calling me all kinds of bad names because I say the wrong thing one side or another. I'm just trying to explain this idea of Jordan Peterson wanting to place and ascribe a standard to Elliot Page that they're not willing to follow themselves. And that's just the point here. So I would suggest to Jordan Peterson, listen to what you've said to Elliot Page and other people you disagree with, and maybe follow the advice you're giving them if you think the advice you give is right. If you think your advice to Elliot Page, don't talk about your transition. If you think that's what's appropriate, then maybe you should be very careful about talking about your personal opinions on the physiques and appearances of models that you don't happen to like, as one example. So anyway, I'm interested to see what's going to happen. Like, how are they going to figure this out with Jordan Peterson being mega famous? And the complaints, because apparently complaints were filed with the College of Clinical Psychologists of Ontario or whatever. Personally, myself, do I think Jordan Peterson should be compelled to take a course and pay for it? And the person that they have to pay $200 an hour to is the one that decides when Jordan Peterson is done? No, I'm not crazy for that idea, because that means Jordan Peterson gets to keep paying and paying and paying. I mean, this person's going to be making $200 an hour. Why would they want to stop? Why would they want to stop the gravy train? I don't know. I'm not comfortable with that concept. I would prefer, if they have to do anything with Jordan Peterson, is just to ask Jordan Peterson to maybe clarify, given there are these rules, there are the procedures are there, and apparently somebody thinks Jordan Peterson has violated them or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. But I would rather they ask Jordan Peterson to perhaps submit a letter, clarification, or just to answer the question, Jordan Peterson, given that you're so famous and you can't take off that clinical psychologist hat, could you explain to us why it's okay that you think Elliot Page needs to shut up, but you can keep talking? Why are you making that distinction? Because as a clinical psychologist, I think you need to justify that. I think you need to justify it. So I do intend to make more videos on this topic, but that's all I got for today. Bye for now, till next time.